She was left for being too small, until a giant warrior built her a cabin the wagon wheels stopped turning at dawn. Mercy Cole felt the silence before she heard her father's voice cutting through the morning air like a blade through skin. "She ain't gonna make it to Oregon, Martha. Look at her." Pa's words carried on the desert wind, sharp and final. "Tiny thing like that'll slow us all to our graves." Mercy pressed herself smaller against the wagon's wooden side. Her bare feet, already blistered from walking beside the oxen for weeks, curled into the dust. She'd known this moment would come. Had felt it building like a storm in the way Pa's eyes skipped over her at supper, the way Ma's hands shook when she portioned out the dwindling cornmeal. The other families gathered in a circle. Their voices rose and fell like buzzards over carrion. Someone mentioned the mountain passes ahead. Someone else talked about winter coming fast. Nobody mentioned that Mercy could hear every word. "She's just so small," Ma whispered, but her voice broke on the last word. "Maybe if we, no maybes left, Martha." Pa spat tobacco juice into the sand. "We got 3 strong boys to think about. Can't risk all of them for one weak little thing." Mercy's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd always been small. Too small to carry water buckets without spilling. Too small to help push the wagon through mud. Too small to matter when food ran short and hard choices came calling. The sun climbed higher. Flies buzzed around the oxen's heads. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Pa walked to where she crouched. His shadow fell across her like a gravestone. "Mercy girl, you come on out here." She stood on trembling legs. The other children stared from behind their mother's skirts. Their eyes held curiosity, not kindness. They'd learned early that weakness was something to watch, not help. "You're old enough to understand," Pa said, his weathered face hard as stone. "We can't take you no further." The words hit like a fist to her stomach. She'd expected them, but hearing them spoken aloud made her knees buckle. "Pa, I can walk faster." "I can, no, child." He looked past her, toward the purple mountains that promised nothing but death for the unprepared. "You can't." Ma appeared at his side, clutching a small bundle. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. Tears were water they couldn't spare. "There's a creek about a mile north. Some berries. Maybe someone else will come along. Maybe." The word hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. The bundle held Mercy's spare dress, a piece of hardtack, and Ma's sewing needle. Nothing else. No blanket for the cold nights. No knife for protection. No hope disguised as practical gifts. "I'm sorry, baby girl." Ma's voice cracked like dry timber. "I'm so sorry." The wagons lurched forward. Wheels groaned against axles. Oxen lowed and strained against their yokes. Mercy stood frozen in the dust as her entire world rolled away from her. Her brothers didn't look back. Tommy, barely 2 years older, kept his eyes fixed on the horizon. Samuel and James walked with their shoulders straight, already learning to forget she'd ever existed. The dust cloud grew smaller. The sounds faded. The sun beat down on her head like a hammer on an anvil. Mercy sank to her knees in the dirt. The silence pressed against her ears until she thought they might burst. Even the wind had died. Even the coyotes had gone quiet. She was alone. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time moved different when you had nowhere to go and no one waiting. The sun tracked across the sky, indifferent to the small figure sitting motionless in its path. A vulture circled overhead. Then another. They knew death when they saw it starting. Mercy forced herself to stand. Her legs shook, but they held. She picked up Ma's bundle and started walking north, toward the creek that might exist, toward the berries that might grow, toward the someone who might come. Behind her, the wagon rut stretched empty toward the setting sun. Ahead lay nothing but sagebrush and stone, a land that cared nothing for small girls with big hearts and hollow stomachs. But she walked anyway. Because giving up meant lying down to die, and something deep in her chest, something too stubborn to break, refused to let the desert win so easy. The first stars appeared as she crested a small rise. In the distance, she could hear water running over rocks. The creek was real, at least. That was something. Maybe it would be enough. The creek sang its lonely song through the darkness. Mercy huddled beneath a pile of fallen branches she dragged together before sunset, her small body trembling as the temperature dropped. The desert that scorched during the day turned cruel and cold when darkness fell. She'd found the water, just like Ma said. Found berries too, tiny, bitter things that twisted her stomach but kept her from starving. For 7 days now, she'd survived on creek water and whatever the land offered. But surviving and living were different things entirely. The coyotes came with the stars. Their howls drifted across the sagebrush like ghosts of all the lost souls who died alone in this wasteland. Mercy pressed her face against her knees and tried to make herself smaller. If she could disappear into the earth itself, maybe they'd pass her by. Footsteps circled her shelter. Soft pads on sand, careful and patient. They knew she was there. Could smell fear on her like perfume. A branch snapped somewhere to her left. Another to her right. They were surrounding her, testing her defenses. The pile of sticks and thorns she'd built wouldn't stop them if they decided to attack. Nothing would. Please, she whispered to the darkness. Please go away. But the desert never answered prayers from small girls. It only listened to strength, and Mercy had none left to give. The night stretched endless. Each sound made her heart hammer against her ribs. The screech of an owl. The rustle of something moving through dry grass. The distant thunder of horses, or maybe just her imagination playing tricks in the dark. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky the color of dried blood. The coyotes melted away with the shadows, but Mercy knew they'd return. They always returned. She crawled from her shelter on hands and knees, her dress torn and dirty, her dark hair tangled with thorns. The creek reflected her face back at her, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, skin burned red by the relentless sun. She looked like death learning to walk. The berries were harder to find each day. She'd stripped the bushes near the creek bare, and venturing further meant leaving her water source behind. But staying meant slow starvation. Either choice led to the same ending. On the 4th day, she tried to build a fire. Rubbed sticks together until her palms bled, struck rocks until her fingers cramped. Nothing. The desert refused to give her even that small comfort. She spent another night in darkness, listening to predators calling her name. By the 6th day, hallucinations began. She saw Pa walking toward her across the sand, his face kind for the first time in years. Saw Ma hanging laundry on bushes that turned to bones when she blinked. Heard her brothers laughing somewhere beyond the next rise, always beyond the next rise. The hunger was constant now. A living thing that gnawed at her insides with sharp teeth. She caught herself staring at lizards that darted between rocks, wondering if she was desperate enough yet to try eating them raw. The answer scared her more than the coyotes did. On the 7th night, something changed. The wolves came closer than ever before. She could hear them breathing outside her shelter, could smell their wild scent on the wind. But instead of circling, they seemed to be waiting for something. Listening. Then she heard it too. Hoofbeats in the distance, steady and sure. A rider approaching through the darkness. Mercy's heart leaped. Someone was coming. After 7 days of nothing but wind and loneliness, another human being was riding toward her creek. She almost cried out, almost called for help. But something held her back. Something in the way the horse moved, too quiet, too careful for an innocent traveler. The rider was trying not to be heard. The hoofbeats stopped. Silence fell like a stone into deep water. Through gaps in her shelter, Mercy saw a shadow dismount. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving like smoke through the moonlight. The figure knelt by the creek's edge, cupping water in massive hands. The coyotes had gone completely silent. Even they knew to fear whatever had just arrived. The man stood slowly, and Mercy's breath caught in her throat. He was enormous, taller than Pa, wider than any man she'd ever seen. Scars gleamed white across his arms in the moonlight. His clothes were dark, travel-worn, and something metallic glinted at his hip. He turned his head, scanning the area with practiced eyes. For one terrible moment, Mercy thought he was looking right at her hiding place. Then his gaze moved on, but she had the sick feeling he knew exactly where she was. The stranger knelt again, this time studying the ground near her shelter. Tracking. Reading the story her footprints told in the sand. How long she'd been here. How weak she'd become. How easy it would be to. He straightened and spoke into the darkness, his voice deep as thunder rolling across empty plains. I know you're there, little one. Come out. I won't hurt you. Mercy's blood turned to ice. He'd found her. After 7 days of hiding from coyotes and buzzards, it was going to be a man who ended her story. Mercy's heart hammered so loud she was sure the stranger could hear it echoing across the water. She pressed herself deeper into the tangle of branches, thorns biting through her thin dress, and held her breath until her lungs screamed. I can smell your fear, child. The man's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Been tracking you for hours. Your footprints tell a story, 7 days alone, getting weaker by the hour. Lucky them coyotes ain't figured out your easy prey yet. She squeezed her eyes shut. Maybe if she couldn't see him, he'd disappear like all the other hallucinations. Maybe this was just her starving mind playing one last cruel trick before the darkness took her completely. But when she opened her eyes, he was still there. Still real. Still watching her hiding spot with the patience of a predator who knew his quarry had nowhere to run. The moonlight caught the scars on his face, deep lines that spoke of violence survived, pain endured. His jaw was granite hard, shadowed with stubble that made him look like something carved from the mountains themselves. This was not a man who showed mercy to the weak. You can come out willing, or I can drag you out. His hand rested on the gun at his hip, casual as a man adjusting his hat. Your choice, little bird. Mercy's knees gave out. She tumbled from her shelter like a broken doll, landing hard in the sand beside the creek. Her dress tore further on the thorns. Blood dotted her scratched arms like tiny rubies. The stranger studied her with eyes dark as midnight, taking in her hollow cheeks and bird-thin limbs. Something flickered across his features, surprise, maybe, or recognition. Jesus. You're just a child. Please. The word barely escaped her cracked lips. I don't have nothing you'd want. No money, no. What's your name, girl? The question caught her off guard. Killers didn't usually ask for names. Mercy. Mercy Cole. Mercy. He said it like he was testing how it tasted. That's a fine name for someone who ain't received much of it lately. She tried to scramble backward, but her weak legs wouldn't hold her. The creek gurgled beside them, indifferent to whatever violence was about to unfold under the stars. Where's your people, Mercy Cole? Gone. The word came out broken. Left me here 7 days back. His jaw tightened. Left you? What kind of folks abandon a child in the desert? The kind that got more mouths than food. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying wouldn't help her now. Nothing would. The stranger was quiet for a long moment, studying her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then he did something that stopped her heart cold. He smiled. Not the cruel grin of a man about to cause pain, but something almost gentle. Well now, Mercy Cole. Looks like we got ourselves a problem. He knelt down beside her, his massive frame still towering over her small form. See, I been tracking that wagon train your folks was with. Got business with them. Bad business. Her blood turned to ice water. What kind of business? The kind that ends with graves dug and justice served. His voice went flat, empty as a winter sky. They took something from me. Someone. Now I aim to take something back. Mercy's mind raced. This man wasn't just dangerous, he was hunting her family. The same people who'd thrown her away like spoiled meat were now being stalked by something that looked like vengeance given human form. You gonna kill them? That depends on what they tell me when I catch up. His eyes found hers, and she saw something there that made her shiver. Pain. Old and deep and festering like an infected wound. But that ain't your concern no more. Your folks made their choice when they left you here to die. I ain't dying. The words surprised her with their strength. I've been making it just fine on my own. He glanced at her skeletal frame, at the way her hands shook from hunger and exhaustion. That what you call this? Making it? Shame burned her cheeks. He was right, and they both knew it. 7 more days and the buzzards would be picking her bones clean. Tell me, little Mercy. You got any reason to want them people alive? Any love left for the folks who threw you away like yesterday's bones? The question hit like a slap. Did she? After 7 days of hell, 7 nights of terror, did any part of her still hope Pa might come back? Still dream Ma might realize her mistake and return to gather up her smallest child? They're still my family. Family don't leave family to starve. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Blood don't mean nothing when it ain't backed by loyalty. He stood slowly, his shadow falling across her like a promise of things to come. I got a choice to make, Mercy Cole. Can leave you here to finish dying slow, or you can come with me. Help me find that wagon train. And then what happens? Then you get to watch them folks face the consequences of their choices. His smile turned sharp as a blade. All of them. The creek whispered secrets to the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle called out like a lost soul seeking redemption. Mercy felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders like a funeral shroud. This man was death walking on 2 legs. Violence wrapped in human skin. Everything decent folk were taught to fear in the stories told around campfires. But he was also the first person in 7 days to offer her a choice. The first to speak her name like it mattered. The first to suggest she might be worth saving, even if it was for his own dark purposes. What's your name, mister? Jacob Thorne. He extended one massive hand toward her. And I reckon you and me got a long ride ahead of us. Mercy stared at his outstretched fingers. Accepting meant becoming part of whatever terrible justice he planned to deliver. Refusing meant dying alone beside a creek that would forget her name before her bones finished bleaching in the sun. She reached up and took his hand. Jacob's horse moved like a ghost through the pre-dawn darkness, carrying them both toward a future neither could name. Mercy clung to the saddle horn with white knuckles, her small body pressed against the stranger's back. He smelled of gunpowder and leather, of long miles and longer regrets. They rode for 3 days without speaking much. Jacob would stop at streams to let her drink, would share his jerky when her stomach cramped from hunger, but his eyes stayed fixed on the horizon like a man chasing demons only he could see. On the morning of the 4th day, he reined in his horse at the edge of a hidden valley. Pine trees climbed the slopes like green fingers reaching for heaven. A stream cut through the center, clear as church glass and singing with life. This'll do, he said, more to himself than to her. Mercy slid down from the saddle, her legs weak from riding. The valley felt different from the harsh desert, softer, kinder, like a secret the mountains kept from the cruel world beyond. Do for what? Building you a home. The words hit her like cold water. She spun to face him, searching his scarred features for some sign he was joking. You mean it? Man's word is all he's got worth keeping. Jacob was already pulling tools from his saddlebags, an axe, a saw, things that spoke of intention made real. Can't very well drag you around the territory while I settle my business. Need somewhere safe to leave you. But even as he said it, Mercy heard something else in his voice. Something that suggested this wasn't just about convenience or safety. This was about a man trying to build something good in a world where he'd only ever torn things down. He started with the trees. His axe bit deep into pine trunks, each swing precise and powerful. Sweat darkened his shirt as the sun climbed higher. The sound of steel meeting would echo through the valley like a heartbeat, steady, strong, relentless. Mercy tried to help, gathering smaller branches for kindling, but mostly she watched. Watched the way his massive hands could swing an axe with bone-crushing force one moment, then measure lumber with a carpenter's gentle precision the next. Watched the way he paused sometimes, staring at nothing, like he was seeing ghosts in the wood grain. You done this before, she said during one of his rest breaks. Built things, I mean. Jacob wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Long time ago. Different life. What happened to it? That different life? His jaw tightened. The axe blade glinted in the afternoon sun as he hefted it again. Got burned down. Along with everything else that mattered. He didn't elaborate, and Mercy knew better than to push. But she filed the words away, another piece of the puzzle that was Jacob Thorne. A man who'd lost a home once, now building one for a child who'd been thrown away like garbage. The work consumed him. From sunrise to sunset, he cut and shaped and fitted. His hands moved with surprising gentleness as he notched logs, checking each joint twice before moving to the next. This wasn't just shelter he was building, it was something approaching art. Mercy found herself drawn into the rhythm of it. She learned to anticipate what tool he'd need next, to hold board steady while he hammered. He didn't thank her with words, but she saw appreciation in the way his shoulders relaxed when she helped, in the almost smile that touched his lips when she handed him exactly the right nail. Why you doing this? She asked on the fifth day, as the cabin's walls rose around them like protective arms. Jacob paused, a board balanced on his shoulder. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, maybe I'm trying to remember what it feels like to build something instead of destroying it. The admission hung between them like smoke from a campfire. Mercy felt the weight of it, the pain wrapped inside those simple words. This man had been something else once, a builder, a creator. Whatever had turned him into the hunter who'd found her by the creek had cost him more than just a different life. It had cost him his soul. The roof went up on the sixth day. Jacob worked with silent intensity, hammering shingles with mechanical precision. But Mercy noticed the way he kept glancing toward the valley's entrance, like he expected trouble to come riding through at any moment. They gonna find us here? She asked. Eventually. His voice was matter-of-fact, like discussing the weather. Men like me don't stay hidden long. Too much blood under the bridge for that. What'll happen then? Then you'll be safe in this cabin while I finish what needs finishing. He drove another nail home with unnecessary force. These walls are thick enough to stop bullets. Stream gives you fresh water. Know how to hunt? Mercy shook her head. I'll teach you before I go. He looked down at her, his dark eyes serious as a judge passing sentence. Gonna teach you everything you need to know to survive alone. Again. The word again cut deep. She'd already survived alone once, 7 days by a creek that nearly killed her. The thought of doing it again, even in this beautiful valley with its strong walls and clear water, made her chest tighten with old fear. But as Jacob went back to his hammering, as the sound of his work echoed through the pines, Mercy felt something strange growing in her heart. Not just gratitude, though she felt that too. Not just relief at having shelter and food and safety. It was something warmer. Something that made her want to help with the work, not because he needed her, but because building this place together felt like building something else, something that didn't have a name but lived in the space between his careful measurements and her eager assistance. The cabin took shape around them like a promise being kept. Each board Jacob placed was placed with love, though he'd never call it that. Each nail he drove was driven with the desperate hope of a man trying to create something good before his past caught up and dragged him back to hell. Mercy watched his hands as he worked, scarred, calloused, capable of terrible violence. But in this valley, shaping wood and raising walls, they were just the hands of a man who'd remembered, for a little while, what it meant to build instead of destroy. She just prayed it would be enough. For both of them. The wanted poster fluttered against a pine branch like a dying bird, caught by the morning wind that swept down from the mountain peaks. Mercy almost walked past it, her arms full of firewood Jacob had taught her to gather. But something about the crude drawing made her stop cold. The face staring back at her from the weathered paper was familiar. Too familiar. She dropped the wood and tore the poster free, her hands trembling as she read the words printed below that rough sketch. Jacob Thorne. Wanted dead or alive. Murder. Arson. 500 reward. The paper crumpled in her fists before she could stop herself. Murder. Arson. The words burned in her mind like brands on cattle hide. The man who'd built her a home with such gentle hands. The man who taught her to set snares and start fires and survive alone in the wilderness. The man who'd saved her from dying beside a creek. He was a killer. Hoofbeats echoed from the valley entrance, still distant but closing fast. 3 riders, maybe 4, moving with the purposeful pace of men who knew exactly where they were headed. Mercy's blood turned to ice water in her veins. She ran toward the cabin, her bare feet slipping on pine needles, the poster clutched against her chest like evidence of the world's cruelest joke. Jacob emerged from the doorway as she crashed through the clearing, his hand already reaching for the gun at his hip. Bounty hunters, she gasped, thrusting the paper at him. They found us. Jacob took the poster without looking at it. His eyes were fixed on the tree line, tracking sounds she couldn't even hear. But when his gaze finally dropped to the crumpled paper, something died in his face. The last traces of the gentle man who'd measured boards and hammered nails with such care. You weren't supposed to see that. Is it true? The words tore from her throat like barbed wire. Did you really? Yes. No hesitation. No excuses. Just the flat truth delivered like a bullet to the chest. Every word of it. The hoofbeats were closer now. Close enough to count, for horses, for men, for guns that would see Jacob dead before sunset if they got the chance. Mercy's mind reeled with the impossibility of it all. The cabin around her suddenly felt different, tainted by the knowledge of who had built it. There was a family, Jacob continued, his voice steady as stone even as death rode toward them. The Morrisons. Good people. Had a little girl about your age. Mercy's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't want to hear this. Didn't want to know what terrible thing had driven him to become the man who'd found her by that creek. Your pa and his wagon train came through their homestead. Asked for supplies, directions. The Morrisons shared what they had, like good Christian folk do. Jacob's jaw worked like he was chewing on glass. Your pa took more than supplies when he left. What do you mean? Took Sarah Morrison with him. Kicking and screaming, but he took her all the same. Said a pretty young thing like that was wasted on dirt farmers. The world tilted sideways. Mercy grabbed the cabin wall to keep from falling. That ain't. Pa wouldn't. He did. And when her father came after them, tried to get his daughter back, your pa shot him down like a rabid dog. Jacob's voice had gone quiet, deadly. Left him to die in the dirt while they rode off with his child. The hoofbeats stopped. Voices drifted through the trees, rough men calling out challenges, demanding Jacob show himself. Time was running short, and Mercy felt like she was drowning in the truth of what her family had done. I burned their cabin after I buried Tom Morrison, Jacob continued, reloading his gun with mechanical precision. Burned everything so there'd be nothing left to remind anyone that good people had died there for no reason but greed and cruelty. And the murder charge? Caught up with your pa's wagon train 2 days later. Found Sarah Morrison. His hands stilled on the gun's cylinder. Found what was left of her after your pa and his boys were done. Mercy's knees gave out. She slumped against the cabin wall, sick with the knowledge of what her blood had done. Her own father. Her own brothers. Animals wearing human faces, destroyers of innocence and hope. I killed 3 men that night, Jacob said. Would have killed your pa too, if he hadn't run like the coward he was. Been hunting him ever since. And me? The words barely escaped her lips. What happens to me now? Jacob looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something break open in his chest. Pain older than the mountains, deeper than any grave. You got a choice to make, little bird. Can run with me, help me finish this hunt. Or you can stay here where it's safe and let me ride out alone. The bounty hunters were close enough now that she could hear their spurs jingling, their leather creaking. For men with guns and rope, come to collect their blood money. They'd kill Jacob without blinking, and probably burn the cabin just for spite. But staying meant betraying the only person who'd ever built her something instead of tearing her world apart. Staying meant letting him face his demons alone while she hid behind walls he'd raised with his own scarred hands. Sarah Morrison, she whispered. What did she look like? Small. Dark hair. Eyes like yours. Jacob's voice cracked on the last words. Could have been your sister. Mercy closed her eyes and saw a girl her age, torn from her family, used and broken and thrown away like garbage. Just like she'd been thrown away. The only difference was that Jacob had found her before the worst could happen. When she opened her eyes again, she was reaching for the rifle he'd taught her to shoot. Then let's go finish it, she said, her voice steady as the mountain stone. For Sarah. For both of us. Jacob smiled then, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. It was sharp as broken glass and twice as dangerous. Outside, the bounty hunters called his name. The bounty hunters spread through the trees like wolves scenting blood. Their voices carried on the mountain air, rough and confident. They thought they had Jacob trapped, cornered in his little valley with nowhere to run. They were wrong. Thorn. The leader's voice boomed across the clearing. We know you're in there. Come out peaceful and we'll make it quick. Jacob checked his rifle one last time, then looked at Mercy crouched beside him at the cabin window. You sure about this, little bird? Ain't no shame in staying hidden. I'm sure. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled on the gun stock. They hurt Sarah Morrison. They hurt me by leaving me to die. Time someone made them pay. The first bounty hunter stepped into the clearing, confident as a rooster in his own yard. Big man with a silver badge pinned to his vest and a mustache that drooped past his jawline. His gun was already drawn, ready to collect his blood money. Jacob's rifle spoke first. The bounty hunter spun sideways, his weapon flying from numbed fingers as Jacob's bullet tore through his gun arm. He hit the ground hard, cursing and bleeding but still breathing. That's for warning me, Jacob called out. Next one's for keeps. Chaos erupted in the tree line. The other 3 hunters scattered, diving for cover behind pine trunks and boulders. Their return fire splintered the cabin logs, filling the air with flying wood chips and the sharp crack of rifle reports. Mercy pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering like a blacksmith's anvil. This was real gunfire, real violence, not the careful target practice Jacob had taught her on tin cans by the stream. "Second window," Jacob said, pointing toward the cabin's east wall. "Man in the brown hat's trying to flank us. Can you see him?" Mercy crawled across the floor and peered through the narrow opening. Sure enough, a thin man was creeping through the underbrush, thinking himself clever. Her rifle barrel found the gap in the logs. "I see him." "Then stop him." The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Mercy had never shot at a person before. Had never even imagined doing such a thing. But the image of Sarah Morrison filled her mind, a girl her own age, torn from her family, used and broken and murdered for sport. Her finger found the trigger. The thin man yelped and dove behind a boulder as her shot kicked up dirt beside his boots. Not a killing shot, but close enough to pin him down. Close enough to matter. "Good girl," Jacob said, pride warming his voice. "Keep him honest while I deal with the others." The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Gun smoke drifted through the cabin like incense at a funeral. Outside, the bounty hunters cursed and called out threats, but their voices held less confidence now. They'd expected an easy kill, not a fortified position defended by two people with nothing left to lose. When the shooting finally stopped, 3 of the 4 hunters lay wounded in the dirt. The 4th had run off into the trees, probably heading back to town to gather reinforcements. They had maybe an hour before more men came looking for Jacob Thorne and his reward money. "Time to go," Jacob said, already gathering supplies. "Can't stay here now. Place is burned." Mercy felt her heart break a little as she looked around the cabin. It had been home for such a short time, but it was the first real home she'd ever known. The first place built for her instead of around her. Now it would stand empty, a monument to what might have been. "Where will we go?" "Following your pa's trail. Still got business to finish." Jacob slung his rifle across his back and headed for the door. "And you got a choice to make, Mercy Cole. Last chance to walk away from this. Last chance to be something other than what I am." She looked around the cabin one more time. At the careful joints Jacob had cut, the smooth boards he'd planed by hand, the windows that let in just the right amount of morning light. Then she looked at the wounded men groaning outside, at the bullet holes in the walls, at the blood pooling in the dirt. This was what loving Jacob Thorne meant. Violence and running and sleeping with guns under pillows. A life of looking over shoulders and wondering when the next bounty hunter would come calling. No peace, no safety, no quiet mornings watching sunrise paint the mountains gold. But it also meant standing with someone who'd built her a home when the world had thrown her away. Someone who taught her to survive, to fight, to matter in a place that cared nothing for small girls with big hearts. "I made my choice already," she said, picking up her rifle. "Back when I took your hand by that creek." Jacob nodded once, sharp and final as a nail being driven home. "Then let's go collect what's owed to the Morrison family." "What's owed to you?" They rode out of the valley as the sun climbed toward noon, leaving behind the cabin and the wounded men and the life that might have been. Ahead lay the trail of a wagon train carrying monsters in human form. Behind them lay the ashes of innocence and the grave of a girl who'd believed family meant something more than blood. Mercy Cole was dead. Had died beside a creek 7 days ago when her father called her burden and drove away. The woman riding beside Jacob Thorne was something harder, something forged in the fire of betrayal and tempered by the hammer of necessity. She had a rifle across her saddle and vengeance singing in her veins. And somewhere ahead, her father was waiting to learn what happened when you threw away the wrong little girl.